What if the end of everything began with something invisible? What if human civilization died not from war, not from plague, not from the stars going dark, but from a single piece of information traveling down the wrong wire at the wrong time? My name is Dr. Elias Crane. I was a network analyst for the Terran Communications Authority. For 18 years, I monitored the quantum data cables that connected our solar system to the outer colonies. 347 inhabited worlds, 12 billion people, all linked together by cables thinner than human hair, carrying information at speeds that bent the laws of physics. I always believed the system was perfect, that our engineers had designed something unbreakable, that the network which held humanity together would last forever. I was wrong. The failure began on March 17th, 2849, at 1423 Universal Standard Time. A single data packet, ID packet 47A, passed through node 47 in the European relay station. It was supposed to go into cable A, which sends normal civilian messages to the Mars stations, but instead it went into cable B, which sends military orders to the defense satellites near Jupiter. One cable. Out of sequence, the packet contained nothing important. A birthday message from a grandmother on Earth to her grandson working in the asteroid mines. 47 words. Happy birthday, Marcus. I hope you're staying safe out there. The garden is blooming. Your grandfather sends his love. Come home soon. We miss you. Those 47 words traveled down the wrong cable. They arrived at a military command node expecting encrypted defense protocols. The receiving system didn't know what to do with a civilian birthday message, so it did what it was designed to do when receiving corrupted data. It flagged an error, logged the incident, and attempted to reroute the packet to its correct destination. That rerouting created a feedback loop. The birthday message bounced between military and civilian networks, each system trying to send it somewhere else, each redirect creating another misrouting. Within 3 seconds, that single packet had generated 47 duplicate error messages. Within 30 seconds, those duplicates had spawned thousands more. The network was drowning in its own attempts to fix a simple mistake. I was on duty at Central Monitoring when the alerts started appearing. At first, just a few yellow indicators on my screen. Minor routing errors. Nothing unusual. These things happened occasionally. Cosmic radiation could flip a bit in a data stream. Solar flares could disrupt signals. The system was designed with redundancy. It would correct itself, but the yellow indicators didn't stop. They multiplied. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. My screen filled with warning lights, each one representing a packet that had gone to the wrong destination. Chief? I called out. I'm seeing some unusual traffic patterns in Sector 7. Station Chief Rodriguez came over to my workstation. She'd been managing network operations for 23 years. She'd seen every kind of technical failure. She glanced at my screen and frowned. That's a lot of errors. Yeah, and they're spreading. She pulled up a system-wide visualization on the main display. Under normal conditions, the network looked like a living organism, data flowing smoothly through billions of connections. Everything coordinated, everything in harmony. What we saw instead looked like a cancer spreading through a body. Red indicators bloomed across the network map. Each red dot represented a node experiencing critical errors. We watched them multiply in real time. 1 became 10. 10 became 100. The infection was spreading through the entire communications infrastructure. Run a full diagnostic, Rodriguez ordered. Find the source. I initiated the diagnostic protocols. The system traced backward through the error logs, following the chain of failures to its origin. It took 47 minutes to complete the analysis. The source. Junction node 447. A single misrouted packet. One cable out of sequence. That's impossible, Rodriguez said flatly. One packet can't crash the entire network. The system has safeguards, redundancy protocols, error correction at every level. I know, Chief, but look at the cascade pattern. Each error generates correction attempts. Each correction attempt creates new routing decisions. Each routing decision has a small chance of error. And when you multiply small chances across billions of operations, the probabilities compound. Yes, the system is trying so hard to fix the problem that it's making the problem worse. Rodriguez stared at the spreading red indicators. How do we stop it? I don't know. The normal procedure would be to isolate the affected nodes, let them clear their error queues, then bring them back online. But the infection is spreading faster than we can isolate. By the time we shut down one sector, 3 more are infected. What? About a full system reset? That would mean shutting down communications across the entire solar system. No messages, no data transfers, no network traffic of any kind. It would take at least 6 hours to bring everything back online properly. Maybe longer. 6 hours of communications blackout. Do you know what that would do? Financial markets would crash. Navigation systems would fail. Emergency services would be blind. People would die. I know, Chief, but if we don't do something, the entire network might collapse anyway. She thought for a long moment. Then she shook her head. We can't authorize that. Not without approval from command authority. Keep trying to contain it locally. I'll escalate to the director. I returned to my station and started implementing containment procedures, isolating nodes, rerouting traffic around infected areas, applying patches and updates to strengthen error correction protocols. It was like trying to stop a flood with sandbags. For every problem I fixed, 3 more appeared. The infection was intelligent, not truly intelligent, not conscious, but following a logic of its own. It found weaknesses in the network we didn't know existed. It exploited redundancies we thought were safeguards. It turned our own protective systems against us. By hour 4, 15% of the network was affected. Communication delays were noticeable across multiple colonies. People were starting to complain about slow message delivery, dropped connections, corrupted files. By hour 8, 37% was compromised. News organizations began reporting on the technical difficulties affecting the network. The official statement from the Communications Authority was reassuring. Engineers are working to resolve temporary service disruptions. Normal operations will resume shortly. They were lying. Or perhaps they simply didn't understand the magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't going to resolve. By hour 12, I received a message from an old colleague, Dr. Sarah Chun, working at the relay station on Titan. The message was corrupted chunks of text replaced with random characters, sentences broken and rearranged. But I could make out the essential content. 1. Elias seeing same. Problems here, network collapsing, tried full node. Restart made it worse. Something wrong with the fundamental architecture. Not sure we can fix this, be careful. 2. The message ended abruptly. I tried to send a reply. It failed. The connection to Titan was dead. 3. I pulled up the network map. The red infection had spread across half the solar system. Major relay stations were going offline. Not crashing, not shutting down, just ... stopping. As if they had given up trying to process the impossible flood of errors. 4. Chief, I called out. We've lost contact with Titan. 5. Rodriguez came over, her face showing the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept in 14 hours. Just Titan? 6. No. Also Ganymede, Callisto, 3 of the Martian orbital platforms, and the deep space relay at Point Verdun. 7. Jesus. How is this spreading so fast? 8. I think. I hesitated. I think the network is breaking itself. Every time a node tries to re-establish connection, it sends correction protocols to its neighbors. But those protocols are themselves subject to routing errors. So the attempt to fix the problem carries the infection. 9. Like a disease. 10. Exactly like a disease. And we're the immune system that's attacking healthy cells. 11. Rodriguez sat down heavily. The director won't authorize a full shutdown. He says the economic consequences are too severe. He's ordered us to maintain operations and contain the damage through local interventions. 12. Chief, with respect, that's not possible. The infection is systemic now. Local interventions won't work. 13. I know, but those are our orders. 14. I returned to my futile efforts at containment. The other analysts around me were doing the same, all of us working frantically, all of us knowing it was pointless. The network was dying, and we were just documenting its death. 15. At hour 16, something changed. The spread of red indicators slowed. For a moment, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe we'd turned a corner. Maybe the containment efforts were working. 16. Then I saw why the spread had slowed. The infected nodes weren't spreading the corruption anymore. They had stopped functioning entirely. The network wasn't fighting the infection, it was dying from it. 1. Large sections of the map went gray. Gray meant no data, no traffic, no communication of any kind. Those regions had effectively ceased to exist as far as the network was concerned. They were islands isolated, cut off from the rest of human civilization. 2. I thought about the billions of people living in those gray zones. They could still talk to their neighbors on the same planet, still use local communications. But they couldn't contact other worlds, couldn't send messages to family on distant colonies, couldn't access the vast library of human knowledge stored across the network, couldn't call for help if something went wrong. 3. They were alone. 4. At hour 20, I received a priority message from Command Authority. It was brief. 5. All stations. Network failure is widespread and accelerating. Prioritize. Preservation of critical infrastructure. Civilian communications are secondary priority. Maintain command and control systems for defense and emergency services. Full system restoration timeline unknown. 6. Translation. Save what we can. Let everything else die. 7. I looked around the monitoring center. My colleagues were reading the same message. Some looked angry, some looked resigned. Chief. Rodriguez just looked tired. 8. You heard command, she said quietly. Prioritize critical systems. Everything else. Do what you can. 9. I spent the next 6 hours trying to protect the communications lines used by hospitals, police, fire services, and military units. It was brutal work. For every critical line I saved, I had to abandon 10 civilian connections. I was choosing who got to communicate and who didn't, who stayed connected to humanity and who didn't. 10. I told myself I was making logical decisions, saving the systems that would save lives, protecting the infrastructure that mattered most. 11. But I couldn't stop thinking about that birthday message. The grandmother on Earth trying to contact her grandson in the asteroid mines. Those 47 words that started everything. Had her message ever arrived? Was that grandson sitting in the darkness of space, wondering why his grandmother hadn't written? Did he know that her words of love had accidentally destroyed civilization? 12. Probably not. He probably thought she'd forgotten, or that something had happened to her. He'd never know that she tried to reach him, that her attempt to connect was the thing that broke all connections. 13. At hour 31, the Luna relay station went offline. Luna was Earth's moon, the communications hub that connected our home world to the rest of the solar system. When Luna died, Earth became an island, 347 worlds. Now 346 could talk to each other, and the most important one, the cradle of human civilization, was silent. 15. I wondered what it was like on Earth right now. 8 billion people suddenly cut off from their colonies, from their children working in space, from their history scattered across the stars. Did they understand what had happened? Or were they just confused, wondering why their calls wouldn't connect? 16. At hour 43, I made a decision. I started documenting everything. Every failure, every cascade, every node that went dark. I told myself it was standard procedure, that someone would need this data to rebuild the network, to learn from our mistakes. 17. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was creating a record because records were all that would remain. When the network finally died completely, when the last connection failed and humanity was scattered across hundreds of isolated worlds, this documentation would be the only proof that we had once been united. 18. That we had once been whole. 19. Chief Rodriguez found me typing my reports at hour 51. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 2 days. 20. Crane, she said, you should go home. Get some sleep. 21. Can't, Chief. Too much to document. 22. The network's at 78% failure. There's nothing left to save. Go home. Be with your family while communications still work. 23. I looked at her. Do you have family, Chief? 24. Daughter. She's working on a terraforming project on Mars. I sent her a message 6 hours ago. It never arrived. Mars relay is down. 25. I'm sorry. 26. She shrugged. It is what it is. At least I got to tell her I loved her last week. Some people won't get that chance. 27. She walked away. I went back to my documentation. 28. At hour 68, the cascade reached the deep colonies, the settlements on the edge of human space, light years from Earth. They'd been experiencing communication delays for days, messages taking longer to arrive, connections dropping randomly. Now those connections failed completely. 29. Those colonies would never be reconnected. They were too far away. Even if we rebuilt the network, even if we fixed everything, the quantum cables that linked them to the core worlds were gone, dead. The infrastructure had collapsed. 30. Those worlds would have to survive on their own. Some would make it. They had the resources, the technology, the population to sustain themselves. Others wouldn't. The colonies that depended on trade, on imported food, on technical support from more developed worlds, they would slowly die. 31. I added them to my chronicle. Names of worlds that would become myths. Places that humanity would forget existed. 32. At hour 79, our monitoring station lost power. Not from the network failure, from a simple mechanical breakdown. The backup generators that powered our systems failed. We had lights, life support, basic systems, but no network access, no ability to monitor anything. 33. We sat in the monitoring center, surrounded by dark screens, and we finally understood what everyone else was experiencing. The silence, the disconnection, the isolation. 34. Well, Chief Rodriguez said into the darkness. I guess that's it then. 35. Yeah, I replied. I guess it is. 36. We sat together in the quiet. Outside the station windows, Earth turned below us, beautiful and blue and alive, completely cut off from the civilization it had created. 37. One cable out of sequence. That's all it took. One tiny error in a system of billions of connections. One piece of information in the wrong place at the wrong time. 38. And now we were alone. All of us, scattered across the stars, unable to reach each other. Islands calling out into darkness, with no one to answer. 39. I had witnessed the death of human unity. Now I would experience the death of everything we had built. 40. The silence was the worst part. 41. For 18 years, I had worked surrounded by the constant hum of data. The quiet whisper of information flowing through cables, the soft beeping of successful transmissions, the rhythmic pulse of a network carrying billions of conversations across the void of space. 42. Now there was nothing. Just the mechanical breathing of life support and the occasional creak of metal, expanding and contracting in the temperature shifts between light and shadow. 43. Our monitoring station orbited Earth at a distance of 42,000 kilometers. We were geosynchronous, always hanging above the same spot on the planet's surface, watching the same patch of ocean and continent rotate beneath us. Before the collapse, we had been connected to everything. Now we could see Earth, could watch billions of people going about their lives, but we couldn't talk to them. 44. We couldn't even talk to the other orbital stations. They were visible as tiny points of light in the darkness, close enough to reach with a shuttle in a few hours, but we had no way to communicate with them. Our transmitters still worked, but the relay systems that would carry our signals were dead. 45. We were like survivors of a shipwreck, floating on separate pieces of wreckage, able to see each other, but unable to speak. 46. Chief Rodriguez organized a meeting of all station personnel 3 days after the main power failure. 27 people gathered in the commons area, the only space large enough to hold us all. We were engineers, technicians, analysts, maintenance workers, people who had spent our careers keeping the network running. 47. Now the network was dead, and we needed to figure out how to survive. 48. Our situation is stable, Rodriguez began. Life support is functioning. We have food and water for approximately 4 months. The solar panels are providing adequate power for basic operations. We're in no immediate danger. 49. But we're trapped, someone said. We can't call for rescue. We can't coordinate with anyone. We can't even tell Earth that we're up here and need help. 50. I know, Rodriguez said calmly, but Earth knows we're here. This station has been operational for 43 years. They know we exist. When communications went down, ground control would have noted that they lost contact with us. They'll send someone eventually. 51. When? 52. I don't know. Days, weeks, maybe months. Earth has a lot of problems right now. We might not be their highest priority. 53. The room fell silent. Everyone was thinking the same thing. What if Earth was dealing with catastrophes of its own? What if the network collapse had caused chaos on the surface? What if no one was? Cunning? 54. Rodriguez continued. In the meantime, we maintain the station. We preserve our systems. We stay alive. And we document everything that happens. When rescue comes, we need to provide them with a complete record of the network failure. That data might be critical for rebuilding. 1. I spent the following days continuing my chronicle. Without network access, I wrote it the old-fashioned way, typing into a local computer, saving files to physical storage drives. I documented every detail I could remember about the cascade, the timeline of failures, the patterns of spread, the nodes that died, and the order in which they fell. 2. I told myself this information would be valuable, that engineers would study it to understand what went wrong, that my careful documentation would help prevent future disasters. 3. But I also knew I was creating a memorial, a testament to what we had lost. 4. 1 week after the collapse, we managed to establish visual contact with Earth using an old optical telescope mounted on the station's exterior. We couldn't transmit messages, but we could observe. We could watch .5. What we saw was disturbing .6. The night side of Earth no longer glowed with the usual pattern of city lights. Large sections of the planet were dark, not the natural darkness of oceans or wilderness, but the artificial darkness of cities without power. Power grids were failing. Point 7. That made sense. Modern power distribution systems relied on network communications for coordination. With the network down, those systems couldn't balance loads, couldn't respond to demand changes, couldn't prevent cascade failures. 8. Earth was experiencing exactly what had happened to the communications. Network or collapse spreading through interconnected systems. Each failure making the next failure more likely. 9. I watched the lights go out in Tokyo, then Cairo, then Sao Paulo, major metropolitan areas that had glowed bright for centuries, now fading into darkness. 10. How many people are down there? Asked Kim, one of our junior technicians. She was 24 years old. She'd grown up in New Seattle. Her entire family lived on Earth. 11. Current population is approximately 8.2 billion. I replied. 12. And they have no power? No communications? How will they? She stopped. She didn't need to finish the question. We all knew. The answer. 13. They wouldn't. Not all of them. Maybe not most of them. 14. Modern civilization required infrastructure. Electricity, clean water, food distribution, medical services, all of it depended on systems that needed coordination, needed communication. Without the network, those systems were breaking down. 15. Earth was sliding into a dark age, and we could only watch. 16. 2 weeks after the collapse, we detected movement from one of the other orbital stations. Through the telescope, we could see a shuttle launching. It moved in a slow arc away from its home station, its trajectory taking it toward Earth's atmosphere. 17. Someone's evacuating, Rodriguez said, watching the shuttle descend. They must be running out of supplies. 18. Will they make it? Kim asked. 19. Depends where they land and what conditions are like on the ground. 20. We watched the shuttle disappear into the cloud layer. We never knew if it landed safely. We never knew what happened to the people aboard. 21. But over the following weeks, we saw more shuttles. Dozens of them. Orbital stations, satellites, space platforms. Everyone who could was abandoning their positions and heading for Earth. The evacuation was uncoordinated, desperate. Without communications, people couldn't plan landing sites or coordinate with ground control. They were just dropping blindly toward the surface, hoping to find somewhere safe. 22. Some shuttles didn't make it. We watched several burn up during re-entry, their heat shields failing, or their descent angles too steep. They became brief streaks of light across the daytime sky. Meteors carrying human beings. 23. I documented each one, added them to my chronicle. Another set of casualties. More names for the necrology. 24. Our own supplies were depleting. The 4-month estimate Rodriguez had given was optimistic. In reality, with 27 people consuming resources, we had maybe 10 weeks before we faced critical shortages. 25. We should evacuate too, some people argued. Take our chances on Earth rather than slowly starve up here. 26. But Rodriguez refused. Our shuttle can only carry 14 people, which means leaving 13 behind. I won't make that choice. We stay together. We wait for rescue. 27. And if rescue never comes? 28. Then we die together. That's better than splitting up. 29. It was a strange kind of comfort, knowing that whatever happened, we wouldn't face it alone. in a universe that had suddenly become very isolating. That solidarity mattered. 30. 3 weeks after the collapse, I had a realization while reviewing my documentation. The birthday message that started everything, the one from the grandmother to her grandson, had been sent from Earth, from the Asian Pacific region, from a city called Chengdu. 31. I went to the telescope and searched for Chengdu, found it on Earth's night side. It was dark. No lights, no power. The city where it all began was now silent. 32. I wondered if the grandmother was still alive, if she knew what her message had done, if anyone had told her that her attempt to wish her grandson happy birthday had accidentally triggered the collapse of human civilization. 33. Probably not. She probably just thought her message had failed to send, that the network was down and she'd try again later. She had no idea that her words had become a plague, spreading through the system, breaking everything they touched. 34. I felt a strange kinship with her. Both of us were guilty of good intentions. She had tried to maintain a connection with her grandson. I had tried to maintain the network that made such connections possible. Both of us had failed. Both of us had contributed to the isolation we now experienced. 35. The difference was that she didn't know. I did. I would carry that knowledge until I died. 36. 4 weeks after the collapse, Earth stopped getting darker. The power grid failures had reached their maximum extent. What remained were scattered pockets of functionality regions that had managed to isolate themselves, that had maintained local power generation, that had adapted to the new reality. 37. Through the telescope, we could identify those regions. Islands of light in a dark world. There was a bright cluster in Northern Europe, another in East Africa, a third in the South American interior. These places had survived. Somehow, they had maintained enough infrastructure to keep the lights on. 38. I wondered what life was like in those islands. Were they sharing resources with the dark regions, trying to help their neighbors? Or had they closed their borders, hoarding what they had, leaving everyone else to fend for themselves? 39. I suspected the latter. Scarcity makes people selfish. When survival is at stake, compassion becomes a luxury. 40. 5 weeks after the collapse, we received a signal. 41. It was crude and optical pulse, someone flashing a laser from the surface of Earth. The message was simple Morse code, a communication method that predated electronic networks by centuries. 42. Orbital stations. Earth. Command operational. Evacuate to coordinates 47.6 N, 122.3 W. Shuttle recovery available. Food. Medicine. Repeat. 43. The message cycled for hours. Someone on Earth had managed to get a laser powerful enough to reach orbit. They were calling us home. 44. Rodriguez called another meeting. Those coordinates are in the Pacific Northwest, Old Seattle, one of the regions still showing power. They're offering to recover anyone who can reach them. 45. Can we make it? Someone asked. 46. Our shuttle has enough fuel for a controlled descent. If we aim for those coordinates, we should land within 50 kilometers. Close enough to reach. On foot if necessary. 47. Should we go? 48. Rodriguez looked around the room. Looked at all of us. That's not my decision alone. We vote. Everyone gets a say. 49. The vote was unanimous. We would evacuate. All of us would go to Earth, land near Seattle, and hope that whoever was sending that signal could actually help us. 50. We spent 2 days preparing, loading the shuttle with whatever supplies we could carry, backing up all our documentation to portable drives, sealing the monitoring station so it wouldn't degrade too quickly in our absence. 51. I took my chronicle with me. All of it. Every report, every log entry, every piece of documentation I had created. It filled 3 storage drives a complete record of how the network died. 52. On the morning of our departure, though morning was an arbitrary concept in orbit, we gathered in the shuttle bay. 27 people, all our possessions reduced to what we could carry, preparing to abandon the station that had been our home. 53. Rodriguez did a final check of all systems. She looked at me. Crane, you're our network specialist. Any last thoughts on what caused all this? 54. I thought about the question, about the complexity of the system we'd built, about the millions of interconnected pieces that all had to work perfectly, about the hubris of thinking we could manage something so vast, so intricate, so fragile. 55. We built it too well, I said finally. We made it so efficient, so interconnected, so dependent on every piece working correctly that we eliminated all the slack, all the redundancy that could have absorbed errors. We made a perfect machine, and perfect machines don't fail gracefully. They shatter. 56. Rodriguez nodded. Good epitaph. Maybe whoever rebuilds will remember that. 57. Maybe. 58. We boarded the shuttle. The airlock sealed. The bay doors opened, exposing us to the vacuum of space. For a moment, we hung there, suspended between the station and the planet, between the past and whatever future awaited. 59. Then Rodriguez fired the engines. We fell toward Earth. 1. The descent took 40 minutes. The shuttle shook and rattled as we hit the atmosphere. Heat bloomed outside the windows, the friction of air against metal, burning away our velocity. The automated systems handled most of it, but Rodriguez kept her hands on the controls, ready to intervene if something went wrong. 2. We broke through the cloud layer at 6,000 meters. Below us, the Pacific Northwest stretched out forests and mountains and the gray expanse of ocean. And there on the coast, a city. 3. Seattle, or what remained of it. Parts of it were dark, but the central core still glowed. Power, civilization, people. 4. We landed hard in a clearing 20 kilometers from the city center. The shuttle's landing gear deployed, absorbing most of the impact, but we all felt the jolt of contact. Felt Earth's gravity pulling us down with a force we hadn't experienced in months. 5. The engines shut down. Silence again. But this was different. This was the silence of anticipation, not isolation. 6. Rodriguez opened the airlock. Fresh air rushed in, real air, not the recycled atmosphere of the station. It smelled of pine trees and rain and soil. It smelled like home. 7. We emerged into a forest. Trees rose around us, tall and ancient. The ground was covered in moss and fallen needles. It was beautiful. After months in the sterile environment of the orbital station, the sheer aliveness of it was overwhelming. 8. Which way? Someone asked. 9. I checked our position using the shuttle's navigation system. East, 20 kilometers to the city. 10. Then we walk. 11. We organized ourselves into a column. 27 people, carrying our supplies, beginning the long hike toward Seattle, toward whatever waited there, toward the next chapter of our survival. 12. As we walked, I thought about my chronicle, about all the data I was carrying, about the story it told of how human civilization had built something magnificent and then watched it break. 13. But the story wasn't over. This was just the middle. The collapse had happened, yes, but people were still alive, still trying, still hoping. 14. Maybe we'd build. Maybe we'd learn from our mistakes. Maybe the next network we built would be more resilient, more forgiving, more human. 15. Or maybe not. Maybe we'd repeat the same errors, build the same fragile systems. Watch them break again. 16. I didn't know. No one did. The future was uncertain. 17. But at least we'd have a record. At least someone would know what happened. At least the truth would be preserved. That had to be enough. 18. We reached the outskirts of Seattle on the third day. 19. The walk had been difficult. 27 people who'd spent months in low gravity, now struggling through forests and rough terrain under Earth's full weight. We were exhausted, hungry, and increasingly desperate. 20. But we'd made it. The city rose before us, a mixture of darkness and light, survival and decay. 21. The outer districts were abandoned. We passed through neighborhoods where houses stood empty, their doors hanging open, their windows broken. Cars sat motionless in driveways, their batteries dead, their electronics fried by the same cascade failures that had killed the network. 22. It looked like everyone had moved toward the city center, toward the light, toward whatever power source was keeping that part of Seattle alive. 23. We followed the roads inward, moving through increasingly populated areas. At first, we saw only scattered individuals, scavengers, picking through abandoned buildings, looking for food and supplies. They watched us pass with suspicious eyes, but didn't approach. 24. Then we started seeing organized groups, people working together to clear debris, repair buildings, establish gardens and parks and vacant lots. These were communities adapting to the new reality, learning to survive without the infrastructure they'd once relied on. 25. Finally, we reached the barrier. 26. It was a wall, constructed from vehicles and shipping containers and scrap metal, stretching across the major roads leading into central Seattle. Guard posts stood at intervals, with armed people watching the approaches. 27. Beyond the wall, we could see lights, actual electric lights, glowing in the twilight. Proof that someone had managed to keep power running. 28. Halt! A voice called. Out as we approached, a woman appeared on top of the wall, rifle in hand. State your business. 29. Rodriguez stepped forward. We're from Orbital Monitoring Station 7. We received your signal and evacuated here. 30. The woman studied us for a long moment. Then she turned and spoke to someone we couldn't see. After a brief conversation, she looked back down at us. 31. Wait there. Someone's coming to verify. 32. We waited. 20 minutes later, a gate in the wall opened and a man emerged. He was older, maybe 60, wearing a military uniform that had seen better days. Behind him came 4 armed guards. 33. I'm Colonel Patterson, he said, approaching Rodriguez. I command what's left of the Pacific Northwest Emergency Authority. You said you're from an orbital station? 34. Yes, sir. Station 7. We've been monitoring the network collapse from orbit. 35. And you have documentation? 36. I stepped forward. I do, sir. Complete logs of the cascade failure. Timeline, affected nodes, propagation patterns, everything we could record. 37. Patterson's eyes lit up. That information could be invaluable. Come with me, all of you. We'll debrief you, provide medical care, and get you settled. 38. We followed him through the gate into what had become known as the Seattle Enclave. 39. What I saw inside the wall was remarkable. Despite the collapse of global civilization, this community had managed to maintain a semblance of order. Solar panels covered every rooftop. Wind turbines rose from tall buildings. Generators hummed. In basements, people moved through the streets with purpose-working, trading, living. 40. Patterson explained as we walked. When the network went down, Seattle was one of the lucky cities. We have hydroelectric dams nearby, fed by mountain rivers. Those dams don't need network communications to function. They just generate power and send it down lines. Old-fashioned, simple, robust. 41. But the rest of the city is dark, I observed. 42. Because the power distribution grid failed. It was too smart, too automated, too dependent on network coordination. When it lost that coordination, it shut down to prevent damage. We've been rebuilding it manually. Simpler, dumber, more reliable. Right now, we can power about 30% of the city. That has to be enough. 43. He led us to a building that had once been a hotel. Now it served as temporary housing for refugees. Hundreds of people had gathered here, survivors from the surrounding regions, orbital station evacuees like us, even some who'd managed to trek from distant cities. 44. You'll stay here, Patterson said. We'll provide food, water, medical care. In exchange, we'll need you to work. Everyone contributes. We don't have room for passengers. 45. Understood, Rodriguez replied. What do you need? 46. You're communications experts, correct? We need help rebuilding a network. Nothing like what we had before. Just something local. Something that lets us coordinate across the enclave. Radio, landlines, optical fibers, anything that works. Can you do that? 47. I looked at Rodriguez. She looked at me. We both nodded. We can try, I said. Over the following weeks, I learned the full extent of Earth's collapse. The enclave maintained contact with other survivor communities through radio, old-fashioned AM and FM broadcasts that didn't require network infrastructure. Reports came in from around the world, painting a picture of how humanity had fragmented. Europe was a patchwork of isolated cities. Paris, Berlin, London all had maintained some level of functionality, but the connections between them were severed. Each city was its own island, struggling to survive independently. Asia was in chaos. The massive urban centers that had housed billions now faced catastrophic resource shortages. Without network-coordinated logistics, food couldn't reach cities. Water treatment facilities failed. Disease spread. The death toll was estimated in the hundreds of millions, though no one could verify those numbers. South America had fared slightly better. Some regions had never been fully integrated into the global network. They'd maintained older, simpler infrastructure. Now that old-fashioned technology was their salvation. Africa's situation was mixed. Some areas had collapsed completely. Others had adapted quickly, returning to traditional social structures that didn't require high technology. And the colonies, the worlds beyond, Earth, those reports were the most disturbing. We had no way to contact them. The quantum cables that linked Earth to Mars, to the asteroid settlements, to the outer system colonies, all of them were dead. We couldn't send messages, couldn't receive updates, couldn't even confirm if those worlds still existed. Probably some did. The major colonies like Mars had the resources and infrastructure to survive independently. But the smaller settlements, the research stations, the mining outposts, those places had depended on regular supply ships from Earth, ships that could no longer navigate without the network. Those colonies were dying, or already dead, and we would never know. I threw myself into the work of rebuilding communications. It was simpler than the old network, just radio transmitters, fiber optic cables, and manual relay stations. But it worked. Within a month, we had reliable contact with communities within 200 kilometers of Seattle. Within 2 months, we'd extended that range to 500 kilometers. We were slowly knitting together a regional network, connecting survivor enclaves up and down the coast. It wasn't much. It wasn't the instant global communication we'd once taken for granted, but it was something. It was connection. It was proof that humanity could still reach across distances, still share information, still coordinate. I continued documenting everything. My chronicle had expanded beyond just the network collapse. Now it included the aftermath, the adaptation, the slow, painful process of rebuilding civilization from fragments. I interviewed survivors, recorded their stories, documented how different communities had responded to the crisis. Some had descended into violence and chaos. Others, like the Seattle Enclave, had pulled together. The pattern that emerged was clear. Communities that had maintained social cohesion survived. Places where people trusted each other, where they had strong local leadership, where they prioritized collective welfare over individual gain. Those places adapted. Communities that fragmented into competing factions, that hoarded resources, that turned on themselves, those places failed. It was a lesson about human nature, about what we needed to survive, not just technology or resources, but social bonds. Trust, cooperation. The network had connected us, but it hadn't united us. When it failed, we discovered which connections were real and which were just data transfer. 6 months after the collapse, Patterson called a meeting of all the technical specialists in the Enclave. About 40 people gathered in what had once been a conference room. Engineers, scientists, network administrators, anyone with expertise in complex systems. I want to discuss rebuilding, Patterson said. Not just locally, globally, eventually. We need to reconnect with other parts of the world, with other continents, maybe even with the colonies. I need to know, is that possible? The room fell silent. Everyone looked at each other. Finally, I spoke up. It's possible, I said, but we'd need to do it differently. The old network failed because it was too complex, too interconnected, too fragile. Any new network would need to be more robust. How? Someone asked. Simplicity, redundancy, isolation. We build separate systems that can function independently. Regional networks that don't depend on each other. If one region fails, it doesn't cascade to the others. That's less efficient, Patterson observed. Yes, but efficiency isn't the goal anymore. Resilience is. We need systems that can survive partial failure, that can lose components without collapsing completely. Would it work? I think so. But it would take years, maybe decades, and it would never be like what we had before. Communications would be slower, more limited, but they'd be reliable. Patterson nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll build. Not tomorrow, not next year, but eventually. We'll reconnect humanity. Carefully, safely. We'll learn from our mistakes. He looked around the room. I want each of you to write down everything you know. Document the old network, how it worked, how it failed, what we should never do again. That information needs to be preserved, so that when we rebuild, we don't repeat the same errors. I thought about my chronicle, about all the documentation I'd already created, about the mission I'd given myself, to record the truth, to preserve knowledge, to ensure that future generations would understand what had happened. That mission had just been validated, officially recognized. My work mattered. I've already started, I told Patterson. I have complete documentation of the collapse, causes, timeline, lessons learned. I can share it with everyone here. Do it, and keep documenting. This isn't over. We're still in the middle of the story. The ending hasn't been written yet. He was right. We were in transition between the world that had been and the world that would be. Between collapse and rebuilding. Between isolation and RECONNEC, TION. The old world was gone. The network that had connected humanity across the solar system was dead. But we were still alive. Still working. Still hoping. Maybe we'd build something better. Maybe we'd create a civilization more resilient, more sustainable, more human than what we'd lost. Or maybe we'd fail. Maybe this was as good as it would get. Scattered enclaves, limited communication, a permanent fragmentation of the human species. I didn't know which future we were heading toward, but I would document the journey. I would record every step, every decision, every success and failure, because someday someone would need to know what happened, how we fell apart, and how we tried to come back together. That record would be my legacy, my contribution to whatever came next. One cable out of sequence had destroyed our old world. Perhaps one careful documentation could help build a new one. 3 years after the collapse, I stood on a hill overlooking Seattle and watched the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. The city below me had changed. More lights, now the power grid, slowly expanding as we rebuilt it block by block, building by building. The population had grown too. 20,000 people living in the enclave, working together to survive and rebuild. It was progress. Slow, incremental, fragile progress. But progress nonetheless. In my hand, I held a radio receiver. A simple device, powered by batteries, capable of picking up AM broadcasts from across the continent. I'd spent the afternoon listening to signals from other survivor communities. There was a settlement in Denver broadcasting weather reports and agricultural advice. A group in Austin sharing technical knowledge about water purification. A community in Boston teaching survival skills and medical procedures. Humanity was talking again. Not through the instantaneous global network we'd once had. Through radio waves, traveling at the speed of light, carrying simple messages that took minutes or hours to reach their destinations. It was primitive compared to what we'd lost. But it worked, and more importantly, it was resilient. If one radio station went offline, the others continued broadcasting. No cascade failures. No systemic collapse. We'd learned our lesson. Behind me, footsteps approached. I turned to find Rodriguez climbing the hill. She looked older now, the stress of these years had aged all of us. But she also looked determined, purposeful. "Crane," she said, reaching the top. "Patterson wants to see you. Says it's important." I followed her back down into the city, to the building that served as Enclave headquarters. Patterson's office was cluttered with maps, reports, and technical diagrams. He was planning the long-term reconstruction of the Pacific Northwest. "Crane," he said as I entered, "I need your expertise. We've received a signal from San Francisco. They've managed to establish maritime contact with Hawaii, and Hawaii has been in radio contact with Japan." I felt my pulse quicken. Trans-Pacific communications? Potentially. Hawaii has the equipment to set up a transoceanic relay. If we can coordinate with them, we might be able to establish regular contact with Asia. Nothing like the old quantum cables. Just radio and scheduled ship voyages. But it would be a start. That's incredible. It is. But it raises a question. Should we do it? Should we reconnect with distant regions? Or should we focus on local stability first? I thought about the question, about the lessons we'd learned from the collapse. Both, I said finally. We build local networks that are self-sufficient, that can survive without external contact. But we also establish long-distance connections, simple ones, limited ones. Connections that can fail without destroying the local systems. Slow growth. Yes. We expand carefully. We test each connection thoroughly. We make sure each new link strengthens the overall structure rather than creating new vulnerabilities. Patterson nodded. That's what I hoped you'd say. I want you to lead the project. Design a communication architecture that can span the Pacific without creating cascade risks. That's a massive undertaking. I know. It might take a decade. Maybe longer. But we have time now. We're not rushing. We're not chasing efficiency. We're building something that will last. Over the following months, I assembled a team. Engineers, radio operators, ship captains, linguists. We started mapping out a trans-Pacific communication network that would connect Seattle to San Francisco, to Hawaii, to Japan, to other Asian communities. It would be slow. Messages would take days to travel between continents, transmitted by radio. To the coast, carried by ship across the ocean, transmitted by radio again on the other side. Nothing like the instantaneous communication we'd once had, but it would work. And it wouldn't break everything if it failed. As I worked on this project, I continued my chronicle. The documentation had grown massive. Now, not just the story of the collapse, but the story of what came after. How we adapted. How we survived. How we began to rebuild. I'd interviewed hundreds of people, recorded their experiences during the collapse and the years that followed. Some stories were tragic families separated, loved ones lost, communities destroyed. Others were inspiring strangers, helping each other, people sacrificing for the common good, communities coming together in the face of catastrophe. The overall picture was complex. Humanity hadn't responded to the crisis uniformly. Some people became their best selves, generous, courageous, selfless. Others became their worst, violent, selfish, cruel. But on average, we'd survived. We'd adapted. We'd proven that we could endure, even when everything we'd built was taken away. 4 years after the collapse, we received the first confirmed signal. From Mars. It came through an old deep space radio array that had survived the network failure. The signal was weak, heavily degraded, barely distinguishable from background noise. But it was there. A message from the Red Planet, traveling for 22 minutes across the void, proving that the Martian colonies still existed. The content was simple. Mars colony to Earth. We survived. Population stable. Infrastructure functional. Request. Information about Earth's status. We'll listen for reply. The entire enclave celebrated. People gathered in the streets, crying and hugging and laughing. We weren't alone in the solar system. Humanity had survived beyond Earth. Patterson asked me to compose a reply. I spent hours writing it, trying to summarize 4 years of collapse and rebuilding in a message simple enough to transmit clearly across interplanetary distances. Eventually, I settled on this. Earth to Mars colony. Network collapsed 4 years ago. Global infrastructure failed. Population reduced, but surviving. Multiple regional enclaves operational. Beginning slow reconstruction. Communication will remain limited, but regular. You are not forgotten. Humanity endures. We transmitted the message. Then we waited 22 minutes for it to reach Mars. And we waited weeks for a reply. When the response came, it was longer, more detailed. The Martian colonies had experienced their own crisis when Earth contact was lost. Supply shipments had stopped. They'd faced shortages of critical resources. But they'd adapted. They'd become self-sufficient. They'd learned to survive independently. Now they wanted to help. They had resources Earth needed: rare minerals, advanced manufacturing, capacity, technological expertise. And Earth had resources. Mars needed biological materials, cultural knowledge, human genetic diversity. We could help each other. Not through the instantaneous integrated economy we'd once had, through careful, deliberate trade. Ships traveling between the planets, carrying supplies and information. Slow but reliable. It was the beginning of a new kind of interplanetary civilization. Not unified, not tightly integrated, but connected, cooperative, resilient. 5 years after the collapse, I completed my chronicle. It filled 12 data storage drives, thousands of pages of documentation, interviews, technical analysis, and historical narrative. I'd recorded everything I could about the network collapse and the years that followed. I presented it to Patterson and the Enclave Council. They read it over several weeks. And they called me to a meeting. "This is remarkable," Patterson said. "It's the most complete record of the crisis we have. It needs to be preserved, copied, distributed to every community we're in contact with." "Why?" I asked. "Because we need to remember. We need to understand what went wrong so we never make the same mistakes again. This chronicle is our best insurance against repeating history." They created copies, both digital and physical. They sent them to San Francisco, to Denver, to Boston, to Hawaii, to Japan. Eventually, they'd send copies to Mars. The knowledge would spread across whatever remained of human civilization. My work would be read, would be studied, would matter. I thought about the archivist in the Warhammer 40K chronicle, how his work had been sealed away, never to be read, preserved only. As a futile gesture against oblivion. My fate was different. My chronicle would serve a purpose, would help guide reconstruction, would teach future generations. That realization brought me peace. 6 years after the collapse, I attended the first Trans-Pacific communication test. We gathered at a radio facility on the Seattle coast. Engineers from San Francisco, Hawaii, and Japan had coordinated for months to make this moment possible. A chain of relay stations stretching across the Pacific, ready to pass messages from one continent to another. Patterson stood at the microphone. He took a breath. Then he spoke. "This is Colonel Patterson of the Seattle Enclave, transmitting to our friends across the Pacific. We are alive. We are rebuilding. We are reaching out. Humanity endures. We waited." The message traveled by radio to San Francisco. From there, it was recorded and transmitted to Hawaii. In Hawaii, it would be recorded again and transmitted to Japan. The entire process would take 6 hours. We waited those 6 hours, drinking coffee, sharing stories, hoping. Then, exactly on schedule, the reply came. "This is Administrator Tanaka of the Tokyo Reconstruction Council. Your message received. We are alive. We are rebuilding. We are reaching out. Humanity endures." The room erupted in cheers. We'd done it. We'd reconnected 2 continents. Not with the instantaneous global network we'd once had. With something simpler, slower, but real. I stood there listening to people celebrate, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. That hope. Not the naive hope that everything would return to how it was. Not the desperate hope for a miracle that would fix everything instantly, but a realistic hope. A grounded hope. Hope based on evidence. We were rebuilding. Slowly, carefully, learning from our mistakes. Creating something more resilient than what we'd lost. It would take decades, maybe generations. We'd never fully recover what we'd lost. Billions had died. Worlds had been abandoned. Knowledge had been destroyed, but we were alive. We were working. We were connecting. Humanity would survive. 7 years after the collapse, I stood on the same hill overlooking Seattle where I'd stood before. The city below glowed brighter now. More neighborhoods powered. More people living. More life. In my hand, I held the latest edition of my chronicle. I'd continued updating it, adding new chapters about the reconstruction, about the connections we'd rebuilt, about the lessons we'd learned. It was no longer just a record of collapse. It was a record of resilience, of adaptation, of hope. I thought about how it all started. One cable out of sequence. One misrouted message. One tiny error that destroyed a civilization. But also, one woman refusing to give up. One community coming together. One careful decision after another to rebuild better than before. Destruction was instant. A cascade of failures spreading at the speed of light, breaking everything in hours. Reconstruction was slow. Individual choices accumulated over years, slowly building something new from the ruins of the old. That asymmetry was the fundamental truth of civilization. It's always easier to destroy than to create. Always faster to break than to build. But we keep building anyway. Because that's what humans do. We create. We connect. We hope. The network had failed. The quick, efficient, fragile network that had connected humanity across the solar system was gone. But we were building something new, something slower, something limited, but something that would endure. I didn't know how the story would end, whether humanity would eventually reunite, whether we'd reach the stars again, whether we'd learn from our mistakes or repeat them. But I knew this. We were trying. And that trying mattered. I opened my chronicle to a blank page, added a new entry. 7 years after the collapse, humanity endures, not as we were, but as we are, scattered, limited, connected by fragile threads across vast distances, but alive, still learning, still hoping, still reaching out to each other across the darkness. One cable out of sequence destroyed our old world, but thousands of careful connections are building a new one. Slower, simpler, stronger got the story isn't over. It's just beginning. And this time will do it right. I saved the file, closed my computer, and walked down the hill toward the city, toward the people, toward whatever future we were building together. The sun was setting behind me. But ahead, the lights of Seattle glowed, steady and bright.